Hi to one and all. Today it's a new class that we're going to have. As I have said you yesterday, we have been learning about how to actually talk, or we are basically at voice modulation and rate of speech. And in communications today, we are going to learn about how exactly we are going to communicate. And today we are going to learn about telephone etiquette, which are the most important things that we have to remember whenever we are communicating on telephone. Because I'll tell you guys, whenever you're communicating through phone or whenever you're communicating through a machine, you are literally not seeing any of the persons, isn't it? So you basically are judging the voice and you will be talking on the telephone. So again, when I speak about the telephone, communication skills are the most important thing that you have to remember when I speak about the telephone etiquettes. So in telephone etiquettes today, what are the most important things that you have to remember and what are the steps that you have to follow? I'll be telling you that. And yesterday when I have said you about the voice modulations and rate of speech, I think you people have remembered what I have actually said. But if you haven't, I'll revise the subject once again, because those are the internal connections for the telephone etiquettes. Alright. So today we are going to have the communications classes about telephone etiquettes, and hope you don't forget what we are learning. Alright. So let us see the slide here, and we have voice modulation and rate of speech. We have pitch, rate, volume, speak clearly. When I speak about pitch, people, so when I speak about pitch, when I speak about rate, when I speak about volume, and when I speak about speak clearly, these are some things that we have to remember whenever we are especially reviewing or when we are talking. These are the most important things that we have to remember. And apart from these, we have voice reflections. I just want you to see the slide here. We have voice reflections, we have tone, we have inflection. So these are the most important things I just want you to speak whenever we speak about voice modulation and rate of speech. So let me review this. Voice reflects attitude. Even if the words are correct and intend to be polite, tone could imply the opposite. Voice is made up of 5 distinct elements: tone, inflection, pitch, rate, and volume. Your voice contains specific percentages of each element that make it uniquely yours. However, there is a best practice range within which your voice sounds confident and, most importantly, professional. Tone is the most important vocal skill in great telephone etiquette. Tone expresses your overall attitude and lets the person you are communicating with know how you feel about them. So as I have said you, while you are talking to somebody, your tone would obviously mention your attitude and how exactly you are feeling about the other person when you are talking with them. So this is all about the tone. And then let us go with the inflection. What is inflection? If you can see the slide, inflection refers to the way you highlight certain words and phrases when used well. Representative can use inflection to stress the importance of certain words and keep the caller engaged on track. Inflections are nothing but the stressed words you use on your communications. For example, when you are communicating with somebody, when you stress the word particularly, for example, you have to come, that is, have to is mandatory. So when I speak about have to, I am stressing the have to, right? So this word is called inflection. So word stress that we do here at inflection will obviously put a track on the audience that you are talking to, right? So let us go with the next one, that is pitch. If you can see the slide, pitch refers to how high or low your voice sounds. Generally, higher pitched voices sound abrasive, while low, deeper voices tend to be more shooting. So, right. So when I speak about the pitch, I just want you to know that whenever you are actually fluctuating, or whenever your tone is little high, or your pitch, basically when you go a little high, obviously people whoever is talking to you would feel that you are abrasive, and whenever you are low on your voice would obviously feel that you're sick. Though today I'm sick, I'm not able to speak louder. So this is what, whenever we are low or whenever we are sick, we basically speak little low, right? So that is what I just want you to note it. And then let us speak about rate. What is rate? If you can see here, we have rate refers to the speed and cadence of your voice. Remind your front line staff to speak slowly and clearly, or adjust the rate to match the customer. Rate. What does this rate means in the voice modulation? People, rate is nothing but it refers to the speed and cadence of your voice. For example, you are talking to a person. For example, you are having a conversation. Whenever you are having a conversation, when you are having a conversation, obviously there will be a person opposite to you who will be little high on their voice, or little fast with their voice, or to match their voice. Or example, when you are talking with a person, to collide with that sequence of the talk, you have to maintain your rate. So that is what, maintaining your words and maintaining your fastness or slowness of your language. This will indicates the rate on what you exactly have to collide with the other person who is talking. And this can make your particular thing more deeper and help you in having a good conversation with the other person at that particular situation. So now let me take you with the next point, that is volume. Volume refers to how soft or loud you speak. Volume is the easiest element to control. However, many people are unaware that they speak too softly or too loudly, and will need to be coached to use an appropriate level when taking a call. So when I speak about volume, what I really want to mention in the volume is, people by default, like while we were born and when we brought up, few people by default have the less voice. I mean, they literally can't talk literally louder, and few people by default they have a very loud voice. I mean, they are built in such a way that their voice can be good enough to be heard. So what I can just clearly tell you is, you have to have a grip on your volume, on what particular situation you have to increase and what particular situation I have to decrease. So this increasing and decreasing of your volumes can help you in further when you communicate with anybody, because increase and fluctuations in your volume would basically put a good impact onto the listener. All right. So this is the most important thing that you have to remember whenever I speak about the volume. All right. So now let us see the next point. If you can see the next point, we have speak clearly, taking the time to speak clearly and in a positive professional tone will put the caller at ease. Guys, the most important thing that you have to remember whenever I speak about speak clearly is, guys, when you don't speak clearly, that is like, when you don't pronounce the word perfectly, or when you don't put the proper word at particular situation, or when you don't give gap while you're talking, or when you don't usually communicate properly, or when you don't put the conversation properly without having the gaps or without having any pronunciation, if you just speak like that, the person won't understand you while you're talking, because when the person or when the listener understand you, that is the only thing when you can revert back in communicating together. But when the other person, I mean when two people are having the conversation, if only one person is continuously talking, that is never a conversation, because conversation is something which happens in between two or more. So people always remember that when you are communicating with yourself in front of a mirror, that is a different picture. But when you are communicating with somebody, make sure you speak clearly, because when you speak clearly, the other person will understand on what you are talking and how you are talking. So this can help you in understanding what are the key points of the communication is. So this is something that you have to remember. All right. So now let us go with the heading of today. What we were supposed to learn today and why is it important for us. Okay. So let us see the heading here. Telephone etiquette. Proper telephone etiquette is very important in that you are representing your department, remembering to use proper telephone etiquette, whether answering the phone or making phone calls, leaves caller with a favorable impression of you and your department. Telephone etiquette means being respectful to the person you are talking with, showing consideration for the other person's limitations, allowing that person time to speak, communicating clearly, and much more. Your voice must create a pleasant visual impression over the telephone. So people, when I speak about the telephone etiquette, I was telling about what is exactly the telephone rules and do's that you have to follow when you're talking on the telephone. Because I'll tell you what guys, the first thing before communicating orally is the telephone etiquettes. Because once you know how to talk on a phone, because if you can see, as much as you talk on phone and when you get manners on how you talk on the phone, usually you have a good thing to communicate, especially in front of others. So always remember people, whenever I say about telephone etiquettes, what are the rules of the telephone etiquettes, I'm going to mention here. So here, if you can see the slide, the first point we have is, if you can see the slide, the first point is proper telephone etiquettes is very important in that you are representing your department. Remembering to use proper telephone etiquette, whether answering the phone or making phone calls, leaves callers with a favorable impression of you and your department. For example, if you're in a company, if you're in a company and if you're talking to somebody or if you're making a call, basically you are not representing yourself, you are representing the company, right? So when you're representing the company, the most important thing that you have to remember is how are you talking, all right? How are you talking and how are you communicating is the most important thing that you have to remember. So you are representing basically your company's standards and you put up a favorable impression on the other end when somebody is talking with you. So this is the most important thing that you have to remember whenever we speak about the telephone etiquette. So let us see the next point. Yes, telephone etiquette means being respectful to the person you are talking with, showing consideration for the other person's limitations, and then allowing that person time to speak, communicating clearly, and much more. Your voice must create a pleasant visual impression over the telephone. So these are the most important rules that you have to remember in the telephone etiquettes. So when I speak about the second point, just remember that you, when you're talking, always be respectful. You know, that's what we have been grown up. So whenever you're talking to somebody, basically remember that you are having some respectful behavior when you're talking on the phone. For example, please, sorry, excuse me, and etc. would help you in understanding or putting the respectful things on the phone. Alright, and then we have showing consideration. You know, when you show consideration basically on a phone, the caller, whoever is talking to you, will have a good impression obviously when they are talking with you, and the call will have a happy ending or will beautifully end it. So this is what you just have to remember whenever I speak about the showing consideration out here. And then we have communication clearly. I mean, you know, communicating clearly is nothing but speaking clearly so that the other person will understand how exactly you are trying to communicate. So this is what you just have to remember whenever I speak about communicating clearly. All right. So now let me take you with the next slide. Answering calls, telephonic etiquettes, answering the calls. Try to answer the phone within 3 rings. Answering a phone too fast can catch the caller off guard, and waiting too long can make the caller angry. Answering with a friendly greeting, example, good afternoon. Telecommunications, who is speaking and how may I help you? Smile. It shows even though the phone lines speak in a pleasant tone of voice, the caller will appreciate it. Address the caller properly by his or her title, that is, good morning Mr. Brown, good afternoon Miss Sanders. Never address an unfamiliar caller by his or her first name. Use the hold button when leaving a line so that the caller does not accidentally overhear conversations being held nearby. So people, whenever I speak about the telephonic etiquettes and telephone etiquettes, when I speak about the answering calls, the first point that we were been looking at is try to answer the phone call in just 3 rings. Guys, what will happen if somebody is calling you, or when a client is calling on to you, basically when you are in your company, when a client is calling you, try to answer the call in just 3 or 2, more probably 2 or 4 rings. Because I'll tell you what, more often you don't answer the call, the people will get, you know, literally worried on why exactly you are not answering the call. So this can make the client feel disobeyed, right? So always make sure you answer the call in just 2 or 3 rings. All right, so this is what I have mentioned in the first point of the telephonic etiquette, answering the calls. All right, so now let us look at the second point here. Answer with a friendly greeting, example, good afternoon. Or how may I help you? So when I speak about the second point, answer with a friendly greeting. For example, guys, you answered the call from a client, or you have answered the call from any of the company people, and when you directly start saying yes, or when you say hi, that won't give a good impression, isn't it? So whenever you are answering the call, every time just have a pleasant greeting, that is good afternoon, or you can just say this is this university, or how may I help you. This would rather give a good impression for the other person who is actually listening to you from the company's perspective. So this is while you are working in a company and you have a call, this is what you have to maintain. So now let us see the third point here. A smile, it shows even though the phone lines speak in a pleasant tone of voice, the caller will appreciate it. For example, you are talking on a phone and there is a funny conversation that have happened, or a good conversation have happened, or a smile, like haha, or wow, that's so good. So that's what you literally can communicate to the other person when you are talking on a phone, because that will give a good impression to the other listener who is hearing to your communication on the phone. So in the telephonic etiquettes, answering the calls, the third point is smile and talk. Let us see the next point. Address the caller properly by his or her title. For example, everybody are going to have their own names, isn't it? So whenever you are talking to the person, always make sure when you are talking to the person, make sure you mention with their title. For example, Mr., Mrs., Miss. You have three things that you have to mention, all right? So whenever, for example, I have called you, hello, good afternoon, how can I help you? Well, can I talk to APSSDC concerned Department of Education? You'll be like, yes, Mr. Can I get your name? So they're going to say their name. So you're going to say, hello, Mr. Kranth, I am from APSSDC Educational Department. How can I help you? So this is the right way to communicate with mentioning their names and the titles, which can have a good elaborated continuous conversation on telephone, and it will make a good impression for the person who is actually hearing to you. All right. So now let us go for the next point. Use the hold button when leaving a line so that the caller does not accidentally overhear conversations being held nearby. This is the most important thing that you have to remember, people, especially when you're talking to somebody, especially when you're talking and especially when you're having a conversation on telephone. When you you might ask, for example, the caller might ask, can you just connect me to the Kranth of APSSDC? So when you are taking a call, make sure you put the hold button on the phone so that the telecaller or the caller basically won't hear what you are having a conversation. You might tell your friend to connect to me, but if you don't put the phone on hold, they can hear all that we are talking, isn't it? So don't make that that mistake when you're especially talking on the phone. So always put your phone on hold whenever you are having some break or whenever you are having the conversation, right? So these are the most important common points that you have to remember. So let us have with the more points in the answering the calls of telephone etiquettes. So we have another point here in telephone etiquettes, answering calls. Do not eat or drink while you are on telephone duty. Only eat or drink during your coffee break or lunch break. Probably, people, you have a proper voice, isn't it? So whenever you have a proper voice, you should never ever fluctuate the voice by eating something or by drinking something on the telephone. You might have, you're anywhere talking on the phone, so what happens if I eat something or if I chew something or if I drink something? People, make sure your eating and drinking will have a voice modulation when you're talking on a phone. So this is a very big mistake that you follow in the telephonic rules and do's and don'ts that you have to follow, all right? So this is a don't that you have to remember, that you should never eat or drink whenever you are basically talking on a telephone with anybody else, all right? So never eat or drink anything when you're talking with somebody on a telephone in the answering the calls and telephone etiquettes of conversations. So now let us see the next point. Do not use slang words or poor language Respond clearly with yes or no when speaking. Never use swear words. Yes. When I say don't ever speak poor language, that means there are things where you speak unwanted things on the telephone. When people are saying or when you are having a conversation, say directly yes or no or absolutely or true or uh, probably. So these words, I mean fillers, these can basically put up a good conversation but not poor language. For example, can you swear on me? That is wrong, isn't it? So never use promise, swear, etc., etc. These words won't give a good impact whenever you're talking on the phone. This is a don't again that you have to remember. Please don't use any of the unwanted poor language in the telephone communication. Especially make sure you use yes or no probably to understand or to make them understand about the conversation and the reply back. So let us see the next point. If you can see the next point, be patient and helpful. If a caller is irritated or upset, listen to what they have to say to them and then refer them to the appropriate resource. Never snap back or act rude to the caller. So, when I speak about being patient or not being rude, people, you just have to remember one thing. You are a resource for your company. So if anybody is calling or if anybody is actually calling you to resolve the issue, don't be rude. Even if the person is irritated, obviously a person would be irritated because of the sources that we are providing from our company. So obviously that caller would get irritated or frustrated because of the response that we are giving from our company end. So remember, there is no mistake of ours or the callers. So it is a vice versa communication that you are going to have with the caller. So whenever you are having a good conversation, if the caller is even irritated, make sure you understand what is the problem and then pass on the call to a good resource or the department view so that they can solve the problem. Or if you are literally getting over irritated or over mistreated, make sure you say sorry for the person continuously or pass on the call with a good conversation or a good proverb, but never hang the call or never hang the call or don't try to put the phone with a rude action. So this will make a very bad impact on your company and as well as on you particularly. So this is what you just have to remember whenever we are talking about answering the calls and telephone etiquettes in the conversation. All right. So now let us see the next point. Listen to the caller and what they have to say. The ability to listen is a problem in general, but it is very important to listen to what the caller has to say. It is always a good habit to repeat the information back to the client when you are taking a message. Verify that you have heard and transcribe the message accurately. So basically, when you are listening to the caller and when they have to say, you have to have the listening abilities properly. People, I'll tell you something. When you are not listening to the caller properly or when you are not understanding the caller properly, when you are not able to communicate with the caller properly, the most important that if you can see the point here, If you see the slide here, so listen to the caller, probably the ability to listen is a problem. See, if I have said you, the ability to listen is a problem because you won't be listening to the caller properly, because so many have that problem of not listening to the caller properly. For example, people, I say you are talking to a person, or whenever you are talking to a person, or whenever you are understanding the person properly, then only you can give a message to them back saying the solution. If you don't have the probability of understanding the message, or if you don't understand the message properly, or if you have less listening skills, you will never ever understand what the caller is trying to communicate. So this is the most important thing that you have to remember. So now let us see the next slide here. Always ask if you can put the caller on hold. If you are responsible for answering multiple calls at once, always ask the caller politely if you may put them on hold. Remember that the caller could have already waited several minutes before getting connected to you and may not take lightly to being put on hold. Never leave the person on hold for more than a few seconds, or they may become upset and hang up. So I think this is a problem that we have been facing from so many days, isn't it? So whenever I speak about holding the call, or whenever I speak about hanging the call, guys, remember, always put the caller on hold, because I'll tell you, when you're hanging the call, or whenever you're talking, or whenever you are in a position where you have to take multiple calls, because there might be situations where your partner won't be there in the company, or your colleague won't be there in the company, and the probability of hanging the call, or cutting the call would be less. So at that particular point, what you have to do is you have to take all the 2 calls, or more than 2 calls at one particular situation. So when you are in a position to take more than 1 or 2 calls at one particular time, make sure you take one call, ask the caller to be on hold for a second, ask them politely, and take the other call, also ask them to be on hold, and resolve this problem. Come back to this first caller immediately, because the customer or the client will obviously wait for some time to get connected with you, and after getting connected, even if you make them wait for a longer time, obviously the people will feel very bad on why you are actually making them wait for a longer time. So this is what you should never do, because this won't give a good impression always, right? So never put people on hold for a longer time or for less. Make sure you just put them for few seconds on hold and try to solve the problem as soon as possible, right? So now let us see the next point. That is the final point, if I am not wrong. When you are out of the office or away from your desk for more than few minutes, forward your phone to voicemail. So now if you are not available on your desk, or whenever you are working in the company, you are getting calls and you want to take a break, quick break, and when you are going for a quick break, always make sure your phone is on voicemail, because if your phone is not getting connected, and if I want to talk only with you, how will I communicate? I can't do calls again and again, isn't it? So when you are really not able to be at your desk, make sure you put your voicemail active, so that if somebody wants to communicate with you, they literally will obviously put you into the voicemail, or they leave a voice message for you, so that you can move forward and talk what they actually want to communicate with you through the voicemail. So always activate your voicemail. So now let us see the telephone etiquettes. This is making a call. Till now we have been answering the calls, and then we are making a call. Be an attentive listener, don't do other jobs at the same time. Guys, the only problem is whenever you are making a call, make sure you're very attentive, you are just holding on to one particular job, and don't do multitasking. Don't ever fidget when you are making a call. So always be attentive is the first point that I just want to tell you when you are making a call in telephone etiquette. Till now we were been learning about answering the calls in telephone etiquettes. Now we will be learning about making a call in the telephone etiquette. So that first point in the telephone etiquettes of making a call is be attentive and don't multitask when you are making a call. So let us see the second point here. Call with a friendly greeting. Example, good afternoon, Lingua University, telecommunications, Lisa speaking. For example, you want to talk to anybody after making a call. Don't just rush up saying, I am Kranth and I just want to communicate about the telecommunications of this company. Now, this is a very wrong thing that you will be doing it. So make sure whenever you are making a call, make sure, good afternoon, I am Kranth from APSSDC, is this the right time to talk? So this would obviously put the caller in a good conversation, or this would obviously give a good feeling for a customer to go forward in making a call with you and understanding a call with you. So this is the thing that you have to remember, especially in making a call. And then we have the next point. I'll do it little quick from here because making call is one of the most easiest thing that you always have to remember. Use the person's name because this is already we have learned in answering the calls. Don't interrupt while the other person is speaking. Never ever interrupt when the other person is speaking, because when you are making a call, when the other person is actually talking to you, never ever interrupt them whenever they are talking. So let us see the next point. If they have to be put on hold, ask if you can call them back rather than keeping them waiting identically on the line. For example, if you are being put on hold, just quickly put them into a conversation saying that, can you just call you back after a while, because you can't just wait for long time, isn't it? So always make sure you can call them later or something when you don't want to waste the time and you have to take more calls when you are especially in a company of the calls. Alright, so let us see the next point. When you reach a wrong number, don't argue with the person who answered the call or keep them on the line. Say, I'm so sorry, I must have wrong number, please excuse the interruption, and then hang up. So obviously people, we will be getting so many wrong calls, or especially you will be doing some wrong call. Especially when you do a wrong call, make sure you're talking to the right person. If at all you're talking to the wrong person, then obviously ask them politely that I'm very sorry to interrupt at this point. I think I have dialed the wrong number, and this hanged up a call, so that this will make a good impression onto any person who is talking to you. This is what you just have to remember whenever you are making calls. So how do you handle rude or impatient callers? All right. So this is the easiest way. Stay calm, try to remain diplomatic and polite. Getting angry will only make them angrier. Guys, if already you have an angry caller, I mean, if by default you got an angry caller and he is very, very, very angry on your company's, maintenance and performances. So if you argue back with them, obviously the, the caller would get more angrier. Okay, so never ever, argue with them. Instead, stay calm. That's all. Staying calm will obviously make the other person cool down instant. Let us see the next point. Always show willingness to resolve the problem or conflict. Try to think like the caller. Remember, their problems and concerns are important. So whenever I say try to think like the caller, or always show willingness, always be ready to accept anything, and try to be okay for anything. So let us see the next point. If you are in non-supervisory position, offer to have your supervisor talk to the caller or call him or her back if the caller persists. This is when you want to make your supervisor talk to the person, make sure you just forward that by persisting the caller and then forward to the officer so that they can handle more patiently than you or more briefly than you. So, these can help you in understanding the customer. And the last point here is, if you are supervisor, be willing to handle irritate callers, speak slowly and calmly, be firm with your answers, but understanding sometimes the irritated caller just wants someone in a supervisory capacity to listen to their story if you are unable to help them. So, always make sure that you listen to the story on why actually they are irritated. Make sure you listen to them properly and give them a cool, bold answers so that they'll instant reduce their anger in understanding your things. So, this is what we have learned today about the telephone etiquettes, and thank you so much for listening to the class today and being patient in the class. Though I am sick today, I was literally speaking low, so please don't mind. And I am a trainer from APSSDC and I will be taking more classes on the communication skills. Thank you so much and we will see you next day. Thank you.